You see the title and you think you know the story. You think this is another tale of a daughter who was asked for help and who eventually gave in. But this is not a story about giving in. This is the story of how my parents, who had successfully treated me as their personal bank account for over a decade, decided to put a final, massive demand on the table. A demand that would have crippled my future. They demanded I pay their mortgage. They didn't know I was already done financing their lives. They didn't know the house I was truly interested in was the one directly next door to theirs. And they certainly didn't know I had already closed on it. My name is Sarah. In my family, I was what you might call the black sheep, or more accurately, the ATM sheep. I wasn't a bad kid. I was just the quiet, sensible one who, by some miracle, managed to claw her way to success while my older brother, Mark, slid comfortably into the role of the golden child. Mark could do no wrong. He dropped out of college. It was the system's fault. He needed a luxury car. Mom and Dad dipped into their retirement. Meanwhile, I was paying my way through an engineering degree, working 3 jobs, and getting an email once a month that usually started with, "Honey, we're a little short this month. Can you float us $500?" $500 turned into 1,000. 1,000 went into covering their utility bills. Over 12 years, I estimate I poured close to $60,000 into their lives, money they never once offered to repay. They didn't see it as a loan, they saw it as an obligation. My success wasn't a source of pride for them, it was a resource to be extracted. Mark was the primary drain. He lived at home, rent-free, treating our parents' house like a high-end bed and breakfast. He never had a stable job because, according to him, the right opportunity just hasn't materialized yet. The truth was, Mark was waiting for his inheritance, actively counting down the days until my parents would essentially hand him the keys to the kingdom, the very house they currently lived in. That house, a moderately sized, beautiful colonial in a desirable suburban neighborhood, represented everything they valued: status, security, and a future inheritance for Mark. My parents had told me, quite openly, that the house would eventually go to Mark because he needed stability, whereas I, having my own success, could fend for myself. Every time I visited, Mark would make comments about his future living room or his backyard, completely oblivious to the fact that his actions were sinking the people providing his free life. While I was wiring those endless $500 floats, I was also building something real. My career in software development exploded when a side project I was working on, an innovative cloud management tool, was purchased by a major tech firm. I received a significant payout, more money than my parents had earned in their entire lives combined. The first thing I did was pay off my own student loans, and the second thing I did was keep my mouth shut. The minute my parents knew I had real, life-changing money, the demands wouldn't be for $500, they would be for the entire down payment on Mark's next failed business idea. So I kept my modest apartment, drove my reliable mid-range car, and simply said, "Things are going well," whenever they asked. I created a facade of comfortable stability, not wealth. This secrecy was the first phase of my revenge. It wasn't born out of malice, it was born out of self-preservation. I realized I couldn't cut them off financially until I had a physical barrier between us. The inevitable happened last year. My father lost his job unexpectedly, and their finances, already brittle, collapsed. They had been counting on his salary to barely cover their mortgage, and they had 0 savings. The bank sent the first notice. Instead of selling the house, downsizing, or even telling Mark to get a job, they turned to their faithful ATM. I received a phone call, not an appeal, but a command. "Sarah, we need you to take over the mortgage payments. They're $1,800 a month. We're in crisis, and you're the only one who can save us. You owe us this." The phrase, "you owe us this," was the pin that burst the balloon of my patience. I didn't owe them anything. In fact, I was far beyond paid up, But this was the ultimate play, demanding my future to save their past, all to protect Mark's precious inheritance. I agreed to look into it, which gave me 2 weeks of silence to execute my plan. I wasn't just going to say no, I was going to leverage the thing they valued most, real estate and status, to deliver the final irrevocable blow. I contacted a luxury real estate agent and asked a very specific question. What is available directly next door to my parents' address? I was in luck. The house right next to theirs, larger, more modern, and recently renovated, was on the market. It was precisely the kind of property my parents always drove past with envy. It represented the success they felt they deserved, but that only I had achieved. Within 10 days, I closed the deal. No loan, no mortgage, no debt. Just one swift, clean, all-cash transaction. My attorney drew up the papers, ensuring my name was not immediately searchable on public records until the closing date. My revenge was set. The perfect stage for the confrontation was built right outside their window. 2 weeks after the initial phone call, my parents organized what they formally titled, with dramatic flair, the Family Security Meeting. It was held on a Tuesday evening, a clear power play to disrupt a work week and ensure maximum stress. Mark was naturally present, perched smugly on the sofa, radiating an air of detached importance, as if he were merely an observer to this necessary but tedious financial transaction. My father, sitting at the head of the table, began without preamble. He didn't thank me for the decades of smaller bailouts. He presented a binder. Sarah, this is serious. The bank has been uncooperative. We're past due. We need a commitment from you immediately. We need you to take over the mortgage payments, $1,800 a month. It's a small price to pay for my mother and me to keep a roof over our heads. He looked directly at me, expecting immediate capitulation. Mark nodded along, adding his 2 cents. It's a smart investment, Sarah. You can treat it as your contribution to the family assets. After all, you're the one making the big money. His comment dripped with passive-aggressive jealousy, completely missing the irony that he was asking me to fund his future inheritance. I listened patiently, watching the entitlement play out. My mother even threw in a veiled threat. If we lose this house, Sarah, where will we go? We certainly can't move into your small apartment. The implication was clear. I wasn't just paying their mortgage, I was preventing them from becoming my roommates. I finally spoke, keeping my tone perfectly neutral, almost hesitant. This was the acting part of the performance. I understand, Dad. It's a huge ask. $1,800 is a large chunk of money for a guaranteed long-term commitment. I need to look at the documents and consult with my financial advisor to see how it affects my own long-term plans. They hated this response. They wanted an emotional, immediate yes. But my ambiguity served 2 purposes. First, it bought me more time, and second, it gave them false hope. They left the meeting convinced I was simply negotiating the logistics, not planning a revolution. Mark even gave me a condescending pat on the shoulder. Don't stress, sis. Just get the paperwork done. Over the next few days, while they stewed and waited for my commitment, I finalized the purchase of the house next door. Let's call it the property. It wasn't just a house, it was a statement. The property was on a larger corner lot, featured stunning stonework, and a meticulously maintained garden that made my parents' yard look tired and neglected. It was everything they envied, but could never afford. My legal paperwork was meticulously handled. I closed the deal under an LLC I created specifically for this purpose. This meant that even if my parents tried to search county records, my name wouldn't pop up immediately. The only people who knew were my attorney, my agent, and the previous owners, who were sworn to strict non-disclosure during the transitional period. I had already made a critical discovery. Due to a quirk in the neighborhood's zoning laws, the property had a second, smaller drive that accessed the back alley, avoiding the common front cul-de-sac. This meant I could move in and start minor renovations without their knowledge. They wouldn't see my removal truck, and they wouldn't see me coming and going from the main street. My goal wasn't just to own the better house, it was to use the proximity to highlight their toxic behavior. I instructed my attorney to draft a polite but final letter to my parents. This letter was to be hands-delivered after the grand reveal, severing all financial ties and outlining every single payment I had ever made to them, effectively clearing my debts to them and proving that they were the ones who owed me. I then began moving key essentials into the property stealthily, usually late at night or early in the morning when my parents and Mark were fast asleep. Seeing the two houses, the one I was expected to save and the one I had just bought outright, side by side, filled me with a quiet, icy resolve. The contrast was a metaphor for our relationship, the old, demanding, debt-ridden past and the bright, free, expansive future. The day before the deadline they had given me, I received a text. My mother announced they were hosting an informal celebration dinner that weekend. The vague reason was to thank Mark for handling the bank negotiations so well. This was their standard practice, celebrating Mark for minor, low-effort achievements while ignoring my immense efforts. This dinner, I knew, would be the stage for my public commitment to their mortgage. I replied instantly, "I'd love to come. I have some important news regarding my financial situation I need to share with the family." They took the bait perfectly. They assumed my important news was my decision to take over the mortgage, framed as a heroic act of sacrifice. Mark probably assumed I was just looking for a pat on the head. They had no idea I was walking into their house that night, not as the dutiful, bank-rolling daughter, but as their new, highly successful neighbor who was about to deliver a definitive, crushing rejection. The air in my parents' house that evening was thick with a synthetic cheerfulness, the kind of forced joy you only find when a toxic family is about to demand a favor. The dining room table was set with their best china, a clear indicator that tonight was not just dinner, it was a performance designed to honor Mark and manipulate me. Mark, predictably, was the star. He was halfway through his second glass of wine, loudly recounting his exhausting negotiations with the bank, which in reality involved him taking one phone call from Dad and then complaining about it for an hour. My parents beamed at him, reinforcing his entitlement. I sat quietly, observing, letting the facade build to its maximum height. The higher the stage, the harder the fall. The topic of my commitment was hovering over the table like a dark cloud, yet they consciously avoided it during the appetizer course. They were saving it for the crescendo, the main course, where I would be emotionally softened and ready to sign on to the dotted line. As my father carved the roast, he launched into the scheduled gratitude speech. It began sweetly, thanking Mark for his supportive presence during their financial difficulty. And then, as always, the pivot, the deliberate, crushing comparison aimed squarely at me. "And we are so grateful that Mark has stepped up," my mother said, laying her hand on my brother's arm. "It shows real maturity. Sarah," she turned to me with a pitying look, "we know you're comfortable and we're happy you have your little business, but Mark understands true commitment. That house is everything. Unlike your rental, it's a tangible asset. We just hope you can learn from your brother's commitment to real family wealth." My father jumped in, cementing the insult. "Yes, when Mark finally takes over this property, he will have true security. We have always said, Sarah, your independence is charming, but it's not substance. What you do is a cute hobby. Mark is building a legacy here." The words little business, cute hobby, and not substance were the final grains of sand. They were not just asking for money, they were rejecting my entire identity and my hard-won success in favor of their entitled son. My blood ran cold, but my voice remained perfectly steady. This was my trigger. I placed my napkin neatly beside my plate. "Thank you for the compliment, Mark," I said, ignoring my parents completely, my voice carrying a quiet authority they were unaccustomed to. "It's good to know someone in this family is so focused on tangible assets and real security." Mark looked confused. My parents exchanged a look of triumphant impatience, assuming I was about to announce my surrender. "So, Sarah," Dad pressed, leaning forward, "your financial advisor is on board. Can you start the transfers next month?" I took a slow sip of water, drawing the silence out, relishing the moment of absolute power. "Oh, Dad, you completely misunderstood me when I said I had important news about my financial situation. I'm not here to talk about your mortgage." My mother frowned. "Then what are you talking about? We're losing the house, Sarah. This is not the time for games." "It's not a game, Mom," I corrected gently. "I said I wouldn't commit to your mortgage, and I meant it." Mark exploded first. "Are you serious? You make 6 figures and you're going to let them lose the house? How selfish are you?" "Selfish?" I asked, my gaze piercing Mark. "Is it selfish to finally stop paying for the $60,000 I've already poured into this house over the last decade? Is it selfish to buy my own substance, Mark, instead of funding yours?" My father slammed his hand on the table, silencing Mark. "Enough! Sarah, we raised you better than this. You will take the mortgage, or you will regret the day you turned your back on your family." "I didn't turn my back, Dad," I replied, pulling a document from my purse, a simple sealed envelope. "I simply asserted my right to my own financial future. You demanded I find a commitment to $1,800 a month for a house I would never own. I found a better commitment." I slid the envelope across the table, not to my parents, but directly towards Mark. The movement itself was a violation of their expected hierarchy. "What is this?" Mark sneered, picking it up suspiciously, like it was a contaminated object. "It's a gift," I said, watching their confusion. "It's the title deed to my new house." My mother laughed nervously. "Oh, Sarah, that's sweet. Your little apartment? We're talking about real property here." "No, Mom, I'm talking about real property," I corrected, a triumphant smile finally breaking through. "I closed on it last week. The house is substantially larger than this one, fully renovated, and I paid cash, no mortgage required. Total property value is significantly higher than this entire block." Mark finally broke the seal, pulling out the official document. His eyes scanned the address and the color drained from his face with sickening speed. My parents were still smirking, waiting for the joke. Mark stared at the address, then slowly lifted his head, turning his gaze towards the large bay window that looked out onto our neighbor's lawn. His voice was a whisper, laced with pure disbelief. "No, this is the house next door, the one on the corner, the Petersons' old place." My parents froze. They recognized that address instantly. They had spent years gossiping about how much that house sold for, how luxurious it was, and how they wished they could afford even a fraction of its elegance. It was their ultimate status symbol of unattainable wealth in the neighborhood. "That's right, Mark," I confirmed, pushing my chair back slightly. "I own the house next door. It's a spectacular place. The best part? The closing documents stipulate that I have zero financial responsibility to help with the upkeep or the mortgage of any adjacent properties." I paused, letting that sink in. "So when I told you I wasn't committed to your mortgage, I wasn't lying. My commitment is to my house." The reaction was immediate, chaotic, and exactly what I anticipated. My mother gasped, clutching her chest. "You bought that monstrosity out of spite? You didn't tell us? You spent all that money next door while we were begging you?" The betrayal was not about their financial survival. It was about the social humiliation. How dare I own the better house? My father's face was purple with rage. "You used our crisis to one-up us? You're sick, Sarah. You're cruel." "No, Dad," I corrected, standing up, towering over the table. "I used your crisis to finally draw a line. You taught me that assets are tangible. You taught Mark deserves security. Well, I have secured my own assets. I have secured my future. The security I deserve is the ability to look out my window and know the people next door can no longer control my life." I didn't wait for a reply. I simply picked up my purse and the uneaten plate of food. "Thank you for dinner. I need to get back. I have an early day tomorrow, supervising my renovations. If you'll excuse me, I'm going home now." I walked calmly out the door, leaving them stunned, shouting, and utterly defeated in their perfect dining room. The sight of Mark's devastated face staring out the window toward my newly acquired, far superior home was the sweetest revenge I had ever tasted. Stepping out of my parents' house that night felt like walking through a heavy, soundproof door. Behind me, the muffled sounds of chaos, shouting, arguing, and the distinct clatter of a plate hitting the floor were the noise of their old life collapsing. In front of me, the crisp, cool night air held the silence of freedom. I didn't rush. I walked slowly across the small stretch of lawn, keeping to the shadows, until I reached my new property. I let myself in through the side gate that led to the private back alley entrance, a discreet path that symbolized my escape from their watchful eyes. The contrast between the two houses was staggering even in the dark. Their house was despairing despair. Mine was serene, solid achievement. As soon as the door clicked shut behind me, the adrenaline wore off, replaced by a deep, weary satisfaction. I wasn't just safe, I was geographically superior. Their desperation was now literally next door, but it could no longer cross the property line into my life. The following morning, the retaliation began. It was predictable, desperate, and ultimately pathetic. The first text came from my mother at 6 a.m. "Sarah, you have to talk to us. We need to undo this. You bought that monstrosity out of spite. You're ruining your father's health. We are your family. That money belongs to us. You can sell it and pay our mortgage. Call us now." Mark tried a different tactic, messaging me an hour later. "Look, sis, this isn't funny. You're trying to prove a point. Fine, but the bank is calling. If we lose the house, you think you'll be safe? They'll sue you for reckless endangerment of our family's security. Just transfer the funds for the mortgage before Dad has a stroke. You're being cruel." I read the messages and deleted them without replying. My silence was the most powerful weapon. They expected a negotiation, a plea for forgiveness, or even a panicked defense of my actions. By offering nothing, I forced them to face the cold, hard facts of the situation they had created. I had anticipated this phase. I was prepared not only emotionally but also legally. I had forwarded their messages to my attorney, who promptly filed the final document I had drafted, a letter of formal financial disengagement. That same afternoon, a courier hand-delivered the legal letter to my parents' door. It wasn't just a rejection, it was an itemized ledger. The document, over 4 pages long, contained every single payment I had ever made to them since the age of 20, gas money, car insurance bailouts, utility coverage, credit card debt payments, and those countless $500 floats. The grand total, clearly listed at the bottom, was $63,450.12. The letter concluded with 3 devastating points. Debt cleared, this ledger demonstrated that not only did I not owe them anything, but they were, in fact, substantially indebted to me. No future support. All future requests for financial assistance would be immediately forwarded to my legal team. Property rights. I confirmed the legal purchase of the neighboring property and asserted my right to privacy and non-contact. This document served 2 critical purposes. It dissolved the narrative of owing them, and it replaced their emotional leverage with cold, unassailable legal reality. My attorney later confirmed that their initial panicked calls for reckless endangerment lawsuits vanished immediately after they received the certified letter. They realized they had no moral or legal ground to stand on. The fallout on Mark was perhaps the most satisfying. His entire identity was predicated on his guaranteed inheritance, the colonial house, and the financial stability it represented. When he realized that the person who could truly save the inheritance was me, and I was actively refusing, his entitlement fractured into pure desperation. Mark, in a fit of misplaced rage, tried to visit me. He knocked violently on my front door. I simply ignored it. I was in my home office with its soundproofed walls and state-of-the-art security system. I watched him on the exterior camera feed, red-faced and yelling, demanding I let him in to discuss the future of the family asset. When I didn't answer, he did the only thing he knew how to do. He went home and complained to his parents, further escalating the drama inside their house. The real consequence for Mark, however, came from the wider family network. When the news of the confrontation spread, the truth often leaks out even in the most guarded families. It was coupled with the fact that I, the black sheep, was now demonstrably the most successful person in the entire extended family. Suddenly, his status as the golden child looked hollow. It wasn't enough to be handed a legacy, he had to earn it, and he hadn't. In the neighborhood where image was everything, my revenge was a public spectacle. My parents had told everyone that their daughter was helping them refinance, implying they were still in control. The reality that their daughter had bought the most desirable property on the block next door with cash while allowing their own house to slide towards foreclosure was a massive social defeat. I ensured the move-in process was obvious, unlike the stealthy early stages. I hired an expensive professional moving company whose trucks blocked the street for an entire day. Every neighbor saw it. Every neighbor talked about it. They saw me supervising, calm and composed, while my parents remained shut indoors, too ashamed to face the scrutiny. The most beautiful moment came 3 weeks later. I was sitting on my front porch swing, enjoying the sunset and my perfectly manicured lawn. I saw my father, who had always been obsessed with lawn care, grudgingly cutting his own overgrown grass. He stopped, looked at my pristine property, then looked at his own struggling home. The sight of me, relaxed and successful, was a daily, unbearable reminder of what they had thrown away. The punishment was not financial ruin. It was the endless, crushing proximity to my unearned success. In the end, they could not or would not save their house. They continued to hold on to the belief that if they ignored the bank long enough, I would eventually cave. They were wrong. 6 weeks after the dinner, the official notice of foreclosure was posted on their door. The house was sold to a corporate buyer who had no emotional investment in the family drama. Mark was forced to find a job and a cheap apartment. My parents, stripped of their most visible assets and their primary means of leverage, were forced to downsize drastically and relocate to a small apartment complex across town. They tried one last-ditch effort, a handwritten letter full of pathos and blame. "We told you would regret this, Sarah. We lost everything because of your coldness. We are family." I shredded the letter without reading past the first paragraph. I didn't hate them. I simply recognized them for what they were, people who prioritized their golden child illusion over a real, healthy relationship with their successful daughter. True revenge, as the title implies, was not about watching them destroy themselves. It was about watching me rise. It was about replacing the suffocating expectation of their debt with the absolute, tangible certainty of my own success. I didn't destroy their lives. They did that themselves with years of entitlement and neglect. My action was the catalyst that brought the consequences they had deferred for decades. Today, I live in that beautiful house next door. I have installed a tall, beautiful hedge, a legal boundary that is both physical and emotional. I sleep soundly every night knowing I am not the family ATM, not the black sheep, and certainly not the obligated daughter. I am Sarah. I am the successful owner of the best house on the block, and the sweetest satisfaction is knowing that my personal freedom is priceless. This house isn't a house. It's a monument to self-worth, a fortress of independence, and the permanent, beautiful proof that sometimes the most compassionate thing you can do for yourself is to refuse to sacrifice your future for someone else's past.